the scene of the crime. There is a lot that you know about the person who was arrested, Brian Kohberger, and charged with 4 first-degree murders. Those are death penalty eligible murders. But there is some knowledge about Brian Kohberger that we are just learning about. And we can tell you via multiple sources who are directly connected to this case how Brian Kohberger feels about the mountain of evidence that has just thus far been made public.
Okay. Hi, guys. I must say, the research I was doing today, I thought, I think I'm going to do a short little video. Then I thought, I'm going to have to go live. And then I thought, I'm not going to be able to stay awake. I had a horrible night last night, worrying about a 17% rent increase. But just, I must say, the research, the stuff that I uncovered, I shouldn't really say it's sort of through the excellent reporting of the IDAHO Statesman, really blew my socks off. I was really astounded. Like, so much time has passed since the IDAHO case. It's almost like, okay, that's an old case. Let's deal with Murdoch and Nicola Bulley. And it's so weird coming to this case, and the what do you call it? The insights are so fresh still. You'll see what I mean when I kind of deal with that. Sorry about the fuzziness around that area. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. Maybe if I do that, it'll be a little bit better. Anyway, so it's quite late here. It's 11 o'clock at night my time. You might think I'm normally a night owl, but at the moment my sleeping patterns are synced properly, so I kind of want to get going. Let's have a look at who's here. Stephanie, good to see you. I think I saw Iceland a moment ago. Is Terry here? Lisa Stokes, good to see you. SM Kovalinsky. SM Kovalinsky, thanks so much for passing that article on to me. It's a long form article, but just full of things that, some things I suspected, but it's really incredible, seeing it. I don't know how much we're going to be able to get through. I don't know how much my voice can really handle. I don't know if you can hear, it's a little bit hoarse, but let's see what we can get through. So in this episode, we're going to deal with the number 12 clue we all missed. And yeah, I think let's kind of get down to it. 7 a.m. there. Okay. So this is the article. I put a link in chat from the IDAHO Statesman. It came out today, the 22nd, and it's titled, Brian Kohberger lived here. Pennsylvania friends, neighbors recall Moscow homicide suspect. So let me ask you guys a question. What do you think is the most essential information that we still need to know in this case? What would you say is the most important puzzle pieces that we still want to kind of put together? What would you say? (10 p.m. in Germany. It's 11 o'clock over here. So a couple of you are saying motive, right? And in order to get to motive, you really got to get to who is this person. In order to get to why, you need to look at who. And so the question is, are we going to get motive only in Idaho? Are we going to get motive only in Pullman, Washington? Are we only going to get motive in the last days and weeks of Brian Kohberger's life? And this is obviously assuming that he's involved in this case, under that assumption. Yeah, why? Okay, so anyway, to me, the biggest puzzle piece is, who is this guy, right? And I think we've found out quite a lot about him, what he was doing based on the his movements of his phone, his vehicle, sightings from other students. We actually know quite a lot about what he was doing in Moscow, Idaho, and also what he was doing in Pullman. How much do we really know about his background, about his childhood, about all that kind of thing? I think we know a lot until you go there and you realize, wow, do we know that much? And this article really blew my socks off. Obviously, going to friends again, going to neighbors again, and kind of getting a sense of what is going on there. So that's kind of what we're going to do now. And that's actually where I got this image, the image that you see over my one shoulder. They've sort of highlighted Brian there. And then there's obviously another Brian as well, right? There's fat Brian, and then there's also thin Brian. Well, that's thin Brian, and that's fat Brian. And where is it now? There's thin Brian. When you put them side by side, it's actually quite incredible. Let me see if I can pull up the side by side image. I think it's this one. When you put them side by side, you kind of see almost two different people. And do you notice also in the Murdoch case how different Alex Murdoch can appear, right? What do you think causes that? What do you think causes these extreme changes in appearance? What do you think causes that? So anyway, I think this image really, in a way, summarizes everything I kind of want to say. Just look how different he looks there compared to there. And so one of the things, I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but one of the things that really shocked me when I read this article was that Brian's weight loss was so extreme in high school that he went from, I think, 300 pounds to about half of that. But it was so extreme that he actually required tummy tuck surgery, right? That's crazy. That is an extreme transformation from one physical person to another. And then he also changed, his personality changed as well, right? Doesn't that, don't you find that astonishing that a teenager, essentially an 18-year-old, lost so much weight in his senior year that he actually had to have tummy tuck surgery? Maria says to change so much always causes confusion with oneself. Yeah, I mean, it is a kind of inner dissonance, and also the people around you are like, who are you? You know, what is going on here? Like, what is your identity? Stress can make you lose weight, but also certain kinds of drugs. And also, he was exercising, he was running, he was eating, trying to eat properly. He previously worked in a pizza joint. So it was, I think, a combination of things. But the point is that it's really extreme. It's a really extreme amount of weight loss. And we'll see that there are a lot of things that are extreme that one associates with Brian. His drug addiction wasn't just, oh, he smoked a little marijuana. It was an extreme amount of drugs in a area of America that's sort of known for that in a way, for being one of the most, anyway, we'll get to that. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go onto my script, and this is really, I don't know, I found it pretty incredible. So he is who he was. That's the title of this, right? He is who he was. Is this going to let me, I just want to put this image on screen in a sort of a better way than I'm doing it. Just give me a second. That's a bit better, right? Okay. Right. Okay, so here we go. So we're getting more glimpses of the most hard to see aspect in the Idaho case, and that's Koberger himself. But it's not Koberger from last year, it's Koberger from many years ago. And so in this analysis, we're going to deal with the number 12 clue we all missed. It's a slippery clue. And I want to deal with the long glance, right? I want to I actually want to do basically three episodes. And this one deals with the long glance, the first of the three, all the way back to high school in Pennsylvania, a two-story brick campus, as the Idaho Statesman describes it, a school with a sort of Twin Peaksy ring to it. Don't you think Pleasant Valley High School sounds sort of ominous, given that we're talking about Brian Koberger went to that school, and then the story ends in Idaho the way that it ends. That this kid who went to the school, who's the prime suspect in the Idaho murders, went to a school called Pleasant Valley High School. And I think we could say that it was actually Unpleasant Valley High School for Koberger. It was maybe Pleasant Valley for a lot of other kids, but not for Koberger, right? So we also want to look at the heroin phase in more detail. So more detail about that has come out. And then finally, we want to take a short glimpse at who Koberger is in real time. And we've kind of, in a way, gotten a glimpse at that person through the clip I played from Ashley Banfield. That clip kind of addresses Koberger right now in a way that I think sharpens our idea of his intelligence, or let's say his supposed intelligence. Okay, I think that is how he experienced it. He thought he's worked very hard to turn himself into someone more acceptable, and then what happened? Mel Stiller says, which clue did we miss? Well, I'm getting to it. Okay, so we're going to restrict ourselves in this to the long glance. I don't think my voice is going to handle much more than that. And then we'll, as I said, do the heroin phase and the short glimpse in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, probably not lives, following this analysis. So the long glance. So let me put this map on screen. Okay. So can you see that's Albrightsville on the top left. And where he went to school is actually somewhere else. It's down there. Does anyone know in which town Pleasant Valley High School is? Does anyone, let's just see how well you know this case. Anyone know? Yeah, Unpleasantville. Does anyone know which town Pleasant Valley High School is in? And anyway, you can see that the distance from Pleasant Valley High School to Albrightsville is 28 minutes, about 17 miles. Terry, great to have you here. Well, we've got pretty much all the good mods with us, all the best mods, all the mods, I think. Okay. So when we return to Koberger's original hunting ground, the place where he grew up, what do we find? Well, not much in Albrightsville. It's a tiny town with a population of just over 211. So you can kind of ask yourself, if we're trying to find out who Brian Koberger is or was, right? Should we be going to Albrightsville? Karen Stevens, good to see you. Right. So if we're trying to find out who is this guy, where do we start? Do we go to Albrightsville, or do we go to Pleasant Valley High School? Where do you think is the best place to sort of begin that journey? What are we going to find out? There are 211 people in Albrightsville. It's kind of a threadbare little town, right? So let me ask you guys an open question. where did Brian Koberger actually grow up? Did he grow up in Albrightsville? Or is he just living there, at his parents living there at this point? Amityville, okay. Right, so as I say, Albrightsville is a tiny town with a population of just over 211. Koberger's hometown is actually so small. The closest high school, Pleasant Valley, is in Broadheadsville, almost 20 miles away. I must say these sort of distances remind me a bit of the distances in the Murdoch case, from Mazzell to Almeida, 16 minutes drive, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, so it's Pleasant Valley High School is in a town called Broadheadsville. And so we want to kind of get to know Broadheadsville a little bit. Broadheadsville's population is about 10 times that of Albrightsville at 1,770. It's still small when compared to, say, Moscow. Moscow is 25,000, or Pullman with 32,000. You already get a sense of, in a way, scale, that Brian is coming from these tiny little enclaves far away. And although Moscow isn't a really big town or city, and Pullman isn't either, compared to what he's used to, they certainly are, right? You get that. It's not what you consider big city. It's what he is coming out of, right? S.M. Koblinski says, oh, yes, I lived near Broadheadsville for a while. Okay. Charlotte says, a fish out of water. Okay. Wall Stretcher official says, wow, you all already convicted Koberger. I must say it's kind of a strange thing to say, because we're talking about his childhood. Are we allowed to say what's going on there? It seems like you've already convicted him. We are talking about his background. So, according to the article, John Gress, the principal of Pleasant Valley High School when Koberger graduated in 2013, that's also a date that's important to remember. So this year, it's 10 years ago that he graduated, and that makes sense. He's 28 years old now. 10 years ago, he was 18. Okay, so that makes sense. But it's important. We want to try and remember certain dates where we worked in certain places and all that. So the full quote from John Gress is, he said, out of all the schools, out of all the areas, why? It's disappointing, and I don't know if we'll ever find out why. And I must say, you see this so often, these questions, that they're kind of like rhetorical questions. Like, I'm asking the question why, but I'm not going to try and answer it. That's what we are here to do. We're going to try and answer why, right? Just turn this light a little bit away. A little bit better. Or is it not better? Okay. So he's saying, I don't know if we'll ever find out why. So his own school principal is kind of saying, is there any way we're ever going to figure out why? And this video is like the number 12 clue, not like the number 1 or 2. We've gone like quite a way down that list. So in this analysis, we're about to piece together at least 2 very big pieces of the why. Oh, excuse me. The first we already have, right? Like, while I've been talking to you, we've actually pieced together a very big piece of the why. I don't know if you guys picked that up. Have you guys picked up a very big piece of the why, of the all the pieces of the puzzle that go into the why? Have you guys do you guys know what that is? We've already sort of touched on it. Christina says being a loner around people is even lonelier. Maria says, well, wasn't he bullied at the school? We're going to get to that. So basically what has come through without really even almost just going through the obvious is he's a small town kid, and not just small town, very small town, towns with 211 people and less than 2,000 people. Those are tiny, tiny towns. And do tiny, tiny towns create a certain psychology, not so much psychology, but is it easier to get bored in a small town or in a big city? Is it easy to go maybe off track in a small town or a big city? I suppose you could argue it two ways. Depends where you live in the big city. Depends what's out there in the small towns. But the fact is that I think compared to a lot of the other students in Moscow and in Pullman, he was from a very, very small town. And does that have any kind of impact? Can you be lonely in a small town, especially if everyone in the small town don't really seem to like you? Can you feel a lot lonelier in a small town than maybe somewhere else? And so you want to leave the small town to go and feel lonely somewhere else, right? Become insular, yeah. Okay, so that's really it's such a obvious point, but it's easy to miss because it is so obvious. Coburger came from a sort of rural, backwards part of America where the crowds were relatively small and the fabric simple and straightforward. And this is not to say, I'm not here to say the urban life is better or the rural life is better. You can look at where I live and you could say whatever, whatever. It's simply to say that the environment Coburger came out of and the environment a lot of his peers came out of was probably a little bit different. That's all. That's all it's saying. And then it's kind of saying, could that be a factor? And it seems like it has been. That's all. If you are used to a certain attitude or state of mind, so let me use myself as an example. Without giving too much, without being too indulgent, when I left South Africa for the first time to go and work in South Korea, it was a huge culture shock because I'd never been to Asia. And so every time you travel, you do get a sense of, oh, not everybody thinks the way I do. Not everyone drives on the same side of the road as I do. Not everyone has this attitude to this. Not everyone has this attitude to that. And there's subtle things like, in Asia, you can fart and it's not a really big deal, right? But if you blow your nose and it kind of makes a sound, that is like the worst thing you can do. In Asia, you should spit. If you've got dirt in your nose or whatever, then it's normal to sort of snort and spit. Whereas in other places, it's sort of wow, kind of thing. So you just realize that people have a different attitude to a lot of different things. And it can sometimes be unsettling and can sometimes be challenging, right? And so you realize that when you in lots of different environments. But if you in a particular environment for a very long time and then you go somewhere else, that change can be wrenching. You might feel like, why do you think that's not really how we think about things? And it's like, well, maybe you haven't gotten out enough to know that kind of thing. So this geographical isolation and this geographically insular aspect, and it's not to say that if you live in Albrightsville or whatever that you're going to be some kind of psycho. It's living in that place and being a quiet, reserved kid who's been picked on. In other words, it's insular within insular, if that makes sense. It's not to say if you go to Albrightsville, you're going to come back brandishing knives and swords, or you know what I mean. It's in a fairly isolated part of America, if you feeling quite lonely as it is and you withdrawing as it is, it's going to be even lonelier. That's really the point. You see what I'm saying? So now we're going to deal with a quote from this article from the Idaho Statesman. Arndt remembered Koberger as similar to himself when they met in their early teens, awkward and fairly reserved. So what does that tell you? What does that kind of statement tell you? It tells you that it would be normal for a lot of kids in that same context to be awkward. And you get awkward kids that are, teenagers all over the world. But sometimes kids in more insular situations are more awkward than others, right? And I would include myself. I sort of grew up in a pretty insular environment myself, and I guess I was pretty awkward. And I think the antidote to awkwardness is socialize, mix. I'm kind of bummed out that I was in a all boys school. I wouldn't have minded something else. And I've seen parents and so on see that awkwardness and say, okay, I'm not going to have my kid in an all boys school because I don't want my kid to be awkward, right? So awkwardness is part of growing up, but you can be super awkward if it's super insular, and if it doesn't help if you withdraw as well. So the point I'm trying to make is that the fact that his friend was also awkward and his friend was also, what does he say, reserved. You can kind of imagine that when you come out of a small town sort of situation, when you're in a bigger situation that's more complicated, there's a lot more going on. Like in a there's just there's a lot more you've got to juggle in your mind. It can actually feel intimidating. It's not now a case anymore that the scale and everything is sort of bigger, right? And that's something that can be intimidating and kind of scary. And your confidence has got to rise to meet that sort of thing. According to the article, during hangouts after school and on the weekends, they bonded over video games and wandering the wooded neighborhood. Nothing strange about that. Maybe a little bit the wandering the wooded neighborhood. Maybe that's a little bit unusual. Arndt said he came to appreciate Koberger's sense of humor, his wit, and the ability to observe. And so at this stage, he's kind of an ordinary guy. His Arndt and Koberger are kind of the same. They're both finding their way through the woods, right? Gaylor says, I think it might be more that his family was overprotective. The small town may be a wealthy suburb type of area. Yeah, that is something I said early on, and I got really, what's the word? Shot down. People like, how dare you blame the parents? And it was like, I think he's from an overprotective family. I think that's possibly a factor. I don't blame the parents, but I think that can be a factor. So I 100% agree with you. That's not part of this analysis or this article, though. So although I think his father saying to his neighbor, can you hang out with my son? And his son's like 28 years old. That feels like overprotectiveness. We kind of need a bit more information still in that area, which I think will still come out. Anyway, so Timmy, do you want to? So the interesting thing about Arndt is he said, he liked Koberger's sense of humor, he liked his wit, and he also found his ability to observe interesting. I'm not quite sure what he means by ability to observe. Does ability to observe mean that he was hypervigilant, that he was observant, or that he expressed observations about things? You know what I mean? Does he mean that he was observant or that he made observations about things? But then he said that his friend's personality grew grating over time. And that's the other thing is I think when you in a environment that's too insular, people can start driving each other crazy. Like if you literally think about you in a prison, you can drive your inmates crazy because you getting stir crazy. I don't know if it's just that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Koberger kind of needed to mix with a lot more people than he did. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Some people thrive on big changes, some don't. Okay, so now we come to this other part, the predilection for heroin. So that's something that Arntz didn't share. So Arntz and Koberger kind of share that they're withdrawn and they're awkward. And then you say, so why did Arntz go one way and Koberger the other? Well, one of the choices Koberger made was, well, he was withdrawn and awkward, and he went down the heroin path. Arntz didn't. So does the heroin basically help? Does being addicted to something when your life's not quite going the way you want it, does that help get you where you need to go? Do you know what I mean? If things aren't going great in your life, you're struggling to meet people, is being addicted gonna help you learn those skills and become the kind of person you need to be? So neither of these traits really made Koberger stand apart from his mates. So even the drug abuse isn't like totally idiosyncratic. You can't say, well, he was socially awkward. No, you can't say he was, because he used drugs, that's going to mean anything. So according to this article, drug abuse is a problem in the area. And the key is not just a problem. Yes, this is the part I've emphasized. The region is one of the highest rates of overdose deaths in one of the worst hit states for the US opioid epidemic. So I'll put this in chat and then highlight the comment. So it's not only that Pennsylvania is one of the worst hit states in America for the opioid epidemic. Monroe County is one of the worst counties in the worst hit state. So can you see that? It's a issue that is compounded on another issue. It's like being insular, being withdrawn in an insular sort of situation. This is like taking drugs in an area that's really drug ridden, right? It's not going to be like a little bit of drug use. It's going to be serious drug use, right? And so you could say then, so let me ask you guys this. Can you imagine in this, let's call it drug infested part of America? And I'm not casting aspersions to say that that's a fact in terms of the opioid thing. Can you imagine becoming a drug addict and then you just kind of move on with your life to something else? In other words, it's just harmless. You just take drugs. That was cool. Okay, now I'm going to college in Moscow. In other words, can you, in this place that is extremely, where people are dying from overdoses, and that's another thing that really stood out in this article. So many of Koberger's own friends died of overdoses, right? His own friends, young kids, died of overdoses. So he's already experiencing death. Like, oh wow, that friend of mine also took drugs, dead. That one took drugs, dead. I took drugs. Maybe I've been a little bit lucky, right? Do you think you can kind of take drugs and then you just come out of it with flying colors, and you kind of, it actually damages you, that high level of addiction? It's crippling, it's psychologically crippling, and you don't come out of that without, you could even say, permanent damage. It damages your brain, damages your heart, not just your physical heart, but I think your emotional heart as well. I think it damages your ability to, in a way, you kind of come out of almost like your own psychological war, and you've kind of got a certain amount of self-created, but PTSD, right? And so that is, I think, the Koberger that went to Moscow. It was someone who'd come out of that situation. In other words, he's actually the walking wounded. He's someone who's damaged, and he thinks he's rebuilt his life, but all of those scars are actually still there in a way. And then there's also the temptation when things aren't going well. How do you soothe yourself when you've had that episode in your past? So going back to the article, Koberger had his own lengthy battle with drug addiction. Several former friends told the Statesman. Lengthy battle, not he just had a battle with drug addiction. I think if you are, I'm not quite sure exactly what the age is, but whether it's 14 to 18 or 16 to 20, 4 years when you're that age is a heck of a long time to be like a total drug addict, especially on a drug like heroin. 4 years is a heck of a big fragment of your life. It's almost a quarter of your life at that time. You know, if you to give over to just being out of your skull on drugs. I mean, you're not developing as a person when you're doing that. You're actually going backwards, and all of that lost life, lost living, lost development is actually kind of got to be reclaimed. And you might imagine that you just snap your fingers. Okay, I'm back. I've lost weight. I'm ready. You might think you can just do that, but you can't. You've also got to learn how to deal with failure. You've got to learn how to deal with disappointment. So, according to the article, although a number of deaths and incidents concerned past schoolmates, Koberger's situation is entirely different. It's actually very sad, and there's a lot to take into mind and factor. We don't know why, and it's sad to hear on both sides. Again, just this insistence. You know what? Brian Koberger took a heck of a lot of drugs, but we don't know why any of this happened. Do you think the drugs may have something to do with it? If you live in a place where there's a lot of drugs, you might say, I don't think drugs are relevant. If you live in a place that's quite insular, you might say, I don't think that's relevant. Is it relevant? So the important part to emphasize here is, and I'm going to probably regret saying this, but I'll say it anyway. This is a school bus. It makes you wonder whether Koberger actually went on the school bus. The thing that I'm going to regret saying is when you think about the letter of what that is saying, is that people died around Brian Koberger, right? And so the people pushing the serial killer narrative might say, yeah, I knew it. I knew he was a serial killer. No, they died of drug overdoses. But I suppose if you really want to go and investigate that, well, go and investigate the drug addicts around him that died. There were a couple. There's something like 3, right? Philadelphia. Lorraine says, how could he afford drugs? Well, we know that he worked in a pizzeria, and we're going to find out that he did another job as well. Okay, so if being awkward and being drug-addled was par for the course for some, so some people were awkward and they were drug-addled, and maybe they were both. Maybe they were awkward and drug-addled. Perhaps many locals were that way as well. What made Koberger different? What is the why here? Right? So let's look at where we are at this point. We say he grew up in an insular environment and maybe he was more withdrawn than average. Is that going to turn you into some kind of monster? And you might say, no. then you say, okay, he's unusually insular, unusually withdrawn, and he's taking drugs, and maybe he's taking an unusual amount of drugs. So it's unusually withdrawn, unusual amount of drugs. Is that enough to create some sort of monster? What do you think? Is that the why? And then I think you've got to say, well, weren't there other kids that were withdrawn and also taking drugs? Antoinette says drugs don't encourage users to study. And that is quite a good point, is you're dealing with someone who's trying to change, trying to improve, trying to come out of the hole they're in. And what happens when you're trying to do that and then you end up being the black sheep of the class? You end up being humiliated in front of all these other kids. You end up being exposed as you're marking too strictly. You end up being, okay, you're fired. What does that kind of feel like? You're trying to become someone, and the world around you saying, no, no. Okay. So let me ask that question again, and then I'm going to play something just to drive the point home. What made Koberger different? What is the why here?
Are you sure you want to hear this?
So this is from the Idaho Statesman. Neighbors to the red-roofed four-bedroom home on an acre in nearby Effort, Pennsylvania, where Koberger was raised, were just as astounded, right, that for years their children took the same route to school from the same corner bus stop as him, and I assume that this is it. They remembered the quiet, heavy-set boy who was picked on over his weight. He sat up front and mostly kept to himself. Well, there's your why. There's so much in that paragraph. I'm going to put pieces of it in chat, just so useful that. But this is the key piece. They remembered the quiet, heavy-set boy, another way of saying overweight, fat, whatever they called him, who was picked on over his weight. He wasn't only heavy, he was picked on because of his heaviness. He sat up front in the bus, he tried to sit away from all the other kids, and he kept to himself. So now we say withdrawn, taking drugs, and then there's another thing going on. He's heavy and picked on, right? And then I think you could say, is he a little bit heavy, and is he picked on just a little bit, or what's going on? And really what you want to do now is examine and ascertain all three or four of those things. So is he a little bit insular or very insular? I would say very insular. Is he taking like just a little bit of harmless drug use, a little bit of marijuana here and there? Or is it 4 years of extreme drug addiction, right? And you might say, yeah, well, he got through well, he went to rehab, and he went to rehab again, right? Being a drug addict at that level totally ruins your life. You don't have anything. Your life's going backwards. Your life is being broken. It's got to be rebuilt. So he keeps breaking down his life even further. So not only are you being humiliated and picked on, you destroy your own life by doing whatever that is, and then you've got to recover from that. And he does try and recover. He gets over heroin addiction, which isn't easy. Heroin's one of the most addictive drugs, more than cocaine. He goes into rehab and he comes out. He loses all the weight. He is trying to measure up. He kind of realizes, okay, I need to put the work in, and he does. He goes running at night. He takes up kickboxing. He eats properly, and he loses a lot of weight. He changes who he is. He changes what he looks like. But the fact is that strangers remembered this fat kid, and they also remembered how people picked on the fat kid. And you might say, yeah, I actually remember them picking on that kid. I think that kid remembers it pretty well as well, right? Which is why this, he is who he was. He's still that fat kid who was picked on, right? And if you want to get a sense of what that feels like, the language, read a Stephen King book. Stephen King often uses that whole idea of being bullied, and then you know what I'm talking about, and then evil comes out of that whole situation. In the really excellent book Lord of the Flies, there's a fat kid who's also made fun of, and anyway, that whole situation is pretty nightmarish. So there you have it in a nutshell. They remembered the quiet, heavy-set boy who was picked on over his weight, and he sat up front and mostly kept to himself. But something else has come out of this paragraph that you may have missed. So, and that is that we need to focus our effort on we need to focus our attention on effort, not Albrightsville or Broadheadsville. And here's further confirmation of that. Have you seen this before? I'm sure many of you have. Let's do this. Right? Brian Koberger is from Effort, Pennsylvania, right? So we really need to go and have a look at Effort, Pennsylvania. That's where he's from. He was living in Albrightsville when he was arrested, but let's go to Effort, Pennsylvania. So you have absolutely all the ingredients for Koberger's potential criminal psychology in a single sentence, and yet the why still eludes him. What I'm trying to say is you've got quiet boy, heavy boy, picked on over his weight, and then he kept to himself. None of that's good for someone not becoming antisocial. The fact that so many people remember that mean that it had to have been pretty excessive. Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna, I think, go to effort. But I just wanna, before we get there, I wanna put this up in chat and just emphasize this kind of in a very simple way. So, very simple sentence. Anyone can read that and say, doesn't really mean anything. So what? You see that all the time. But this is what we're talking about. This is who Brian is. Do you agree with each of these? He was quiet. Do you agree with that? I'm just breaking that paragraph into pieces. He was overweight. Do you agree with that? Look how thin he is in this picture. He was picked on. Right? And then, yeah, you have it. He was likely quiet because he was overweight and picked on. Do you think Brian would have been quiet if he wasn't picked on? Do you think Brian would have been withdrawn if he wasn't picked on? Brian was trying to meet girls. Brian was trying to make friends. You hear about Brian reaching out to friends on Facebook later on, and then they just don't reply to him. Do you think he would have been quiet if he wasn't being picked on? Because bear in mind, he goes and becomes like an assistant teacher. He chooses to go to Washington State University, right? He tried to socialize. That's it. So if you take the humiliation away, you could still have an overweight kid. You could still have the drugs, you could still have the insular thing, and you probably wouldn't have the 1122 King Road catastrophe, right? If you take away the humiliation, just that, you can keep the drugs, you can keep the insulinness, you can keep the withdrawnness, you can keep him being a fat kid. If you just take away the humiliation, then you probably won't have 1122 King Road at the end of it. So if you say he was quiet, he was overweight, he was picked on, and he was likely quiet because he was overweight and picked on, this made him even more isolated in an already isolated area, and thus also made him more vulnerable to drugs in an area susceptible to extreme drug addiction. So we're really talking about levels of extreme. You might say, you know what? I've been lonely. Loneliness doesn't make you a murderer. Well, extreme loneliness might. Extreme drug addiction, just on their own, extreme drug addiction might. Extreme humiliation might, and does. So going back to the article, Koberger's old neighborhood is left to try and make sense of a Census Act. This is according to the article. This article. No bells ever went off, said Barbara Tokar, 58, a nearby homeowner and mother of one of Koberger's classmates. No bells ever went off, adding that her daughter told her she never noticed any possible warning signs. And I suppose you could say, I saw someone picking on Brian, and no warning signs went off. But he lost so much weight. Didn't that mean he didn't like being picked on? Didn't that mean he took an extreme measures to try not to be picked on? Also, it's quite a turnaround to go from being bullied, including by girls, to him becoming a bully. It's not just that he changes himself; he changes to such an extent that he becomes a bully. He becomes aggressive. He takes up kickboxing. It changes, right? And then they say, we just don't see no bells went off. We didn't see any warning signs. In other words, seeing someone humiliated on the bus, seeing someone being picked on, I didn't see any warning signs. I didn't really notice anything. Would you have noticed that if people were picking on you? Would you have felt warning signs? So the warning sign is humiliation. If you are in your life and your life's going really well, and you're wondering if there are any warning signs around you, well, look out for someone who feels humiliated or someone who's humiliating somebody else. That is social death. Social death can be, for some people, worse than actual death. So Koberger trying to cope with it in his own way by withdrawing and then by escaping into the heroin phase. So how do you escape humiliation? Well, you withdraw. Someone is saying ugly things to you, so you just sort of look down or you say nothing and hope it stops. And then you try and escape the pain of that when the chatter, someone says something, but when you go home, you still hear it. And then you want to escape those echoes. So then you take drugs. And eventually tries to find his way back after hiding in a cave from all of that. He tries to find his way back to winning the approval of strangers and peers. And as I said, he does that by trying to lose weight. He does that, and that's not easy to do. Losing weight's not that easy. I think it's easier when you're younger. But another thing, kicking heroin isn't easy to do either, and he does that. But this is the point. The sting of humiliation is 100,000 times keener if you are looking for validation like everyone else, right? So what I'm trying to say is that pain, humiliation is not such a big deal if you I don't know, a 60-year-old, or humiliation is never fun. But at the time where people around you are being embraced and accepted and loved, and they sort of forming little partnerships and forming little friendship cliques and all that kind of thing. And in other words, everyone's signing up to their little fairy tales. You guys in that fairy tale, you guys go off in that little chariot. You guys go and live in that little cottage and have your fairy tale. In that context, the sort of where you go out of high school into college, to be constantly denied your fairy tale, even if you just take the picking away, is also humiliating. It's also humiliating that, right? When am I going to get my fairy tale? So if you're looking for validation and everyone else is, but they get it and you don't, somehow you just keep falling short. Somehow everyone else somehow emerges as, all right, all right, you great, come with us, come with us. Okay, you come, you as well, yes, come on, we're all going to a party. Okay, but not you. That's a much harder pill to swallow, right? That's a much harder pill to swallow. In that context, it's a much harder pill to swallow. And especially if it's a double injury. So you were bullied at school and you came out of it, or you thought you did, and then you arrive in another context and it's like, sorry, dude, you still not good enough. Sorry. But I've worked so hard. Sorry. So that then brings us to the number 12 clue we all missed. What do you think it is? What do you think it is?
Let's get the obvious stuff out of the way.
So we are now going to go to effort. I think I've got the map up here. Not that map. Not that. That. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, can you guys see that? So to get to the number 12 clue we all missed, we're going to go from there to, we're not going to go to Broadheadsville. We're not going to go to that school. Instead, we're going to go to effort. All right. And I must say, this was really incredible. Going exactly what you're going through now. Exactly seeing, you're going to see effort populate. And as it all comes together, this really blew my mind. That's why it's the number 12 clue we all missed, right? So look at what happens when we go in a bit further. Can you see it says here, big brown fish and pay lakes? You see that? And it says here, fees, rules, no throwing fish back, no minnows allowed, no stringers, no fish gutted until paid for. Do you see those words? Can you guys see that? No fish gutted until paid for. No pets, no barbecuing. Please put fish in plastic bags before bringing inside. Bring fish up half hour before closing to be cleaned, right? That's over there. And this is right outside effort, right? But let's continue to zoom in. And you can see effort's also quite a small place. And the part that I want you to pay attention to is, so you've got this little reservoir. I guess that's where the hatchery is. But there's a creek over here, the Pohopoco Creek, and there are a couple of little water reservoirs or whatever here, creeks and whatnot. And then here is a pizza joint. I don't know if you guys can see that. It says Benny's 2, I think, and it's ostensibly a pizzeria, right? And you notice that there's a pizzeria. This is in effort, And right next to the pizzeria is a fish place where there's gutting of fish. Are little red lights going off in your mind yet? Let me say that again. Here's a pizza place. Do you know that Brian did work in a pizza place? And right next to the pizza place is a fish hatchery where they gut fish. Do you think there could be a connection? So we are going to go to Street View. I think if I click here, that might take me there. And the pizzeria has since changed hands, I guess. So here we are, and here's that pizzeria. And this is called New York Pizza Girl, I guess. But this is where Brian worked, right? He worked as a pizza maker, I guess, right? And then the issue is, can you see something going on in this image? Can you see something that's happening here? Right, and the thing is, you've got to look beyond this building. And what happens when you do this and you go this way? There's the building, there's the pizzeria. And you go this way and this way. And here's a sign right next to it, Big Brown Fish and Pay Lakes. And you can't quite make out what it says there, where the fish are always biting, right? No license required. And there's Benny's Pizza 2 coming soon. So that sort of, I guess, supplanted it. You can't quite make out the sign. So let's just go to the other side and then look back. There's the pizza place. Big Brown Fish and Pay Lakes, where the fish are always biting. So can you see that right next to this pizza place where Brian worked is a fish hatchery where, well, let's see what this article says. Are little pings going off in your mind? They should be. So do you remember way back when I was profiling Koberger? Before we even knew Koberger was going to be a suspect, right? This was very early on. I said that he's hunted before, and I even suggested that he'd worked in a butchery. Remember, I said I thought he may be working in a butchery. What was it? Idaho Butchery or something like that. Just to the north of the house, sort of around the corner of the golf course, there's a butchery. And I put pictures of the butchery up. And then I said, you know what, if it's not a butchery, maybe he gutted fish. Do you remember me saying that? Remember me saying that? I said, I think maybe he worked in this butchery. That's one way he could have worked with a knife. And maybe if he didn't do that, maybe he'd done that sort of thing, gutting fish. Remember? Well, here it is. 12 years ago, right? 12 years ago from now, so going back from 2023, 12 years to 2011. So 12 years ago, when Koberger was a not so sweet 16-year-old, and I think he was a heroin addict at this point. His boss was 50-something, 59, I think, years old, or maybe he was 49. Anyway, Charles Conklin was his boss. And Conklin owned a building with a pizzeria in it, right? This building over here, which is also that building.
Closer, please. Closer.
Okay, and so when we look closer, we see that. Now on Google Maps, the pizzeria name changes. It goes from, what's it, New York Pizza Girl to Benny Two's. But the point is, it's a pizza place. if you look on Google Maps, you get a sense of what you're talking about as well. Just in, if you look at this, there's Benny's 2, and can you see right behind it is kind of a, well, that's a hatchery, but that is where all of this was taking place. You see, it's right next to the pizza place. I mean, you can see it when we go on street view, but from this vertical view, you see it's literally right there as well. And so the question arises, if Brian worked at this pizzeria, did he work at the hatchery? What do you think the answer is? This is according to the article, Charles Conklin, 61 now, so 12 years ago, he was probably, 49, 50, I guess. Charles Conklin owns the building the pizzeria occupied, as well as the neighboring fish hatchery. So the Koberger's boss not only owned the pizzeria, essentially, I don't know if you could want to say his boss, but the person who owned the building also owned the hatchery. And so then you say, is it possible that Koberger, if he lived in such a small town and he worked in this pizzeria, and the boss basically, or the owner of this building, also owned the adjacent property, is it possible that he may have worked for the owner at the adjacent property? What do you think is the answer? What do you think is the answer? So according to the article, Conklin also owns the neighboring fish hatchery that includes a stocked lake where people pay to fish for a variety of trout and bass. Here it is. In the summer of 2011, Koberger briefly worked there a few months as well. There it is. That's the 12th clue we all missed, is that he did gut fish for a summer. He did use a knife, and we'll get to that in a second. But basically, he worked at this hatchery for a few months, not like a day or a week, probably for the summer. And his job was to clean people's catch. So you can imagine that he was doing that, not just one catch, it's quite a few, right? Conklin recalled that Koberger wrote on a school district job application obtained by the Statesman. So that's not a rumor, that definitely has been confirmed. So he wasn't there long. He worked there once for a few months, and he fired Koberger. It reminds me a little bit of Brian Laundrie working at a a nursery. Slightly different situation, but Koberger didn't show himself to be very personable with customers, right? So even in this work setting, he was, I'm trying to think of the English, he was fucking up, basically, right? He wasn't establishing rapport with the customers. And also, he wasn't improving at filleting the fish. What do you think filleting the fish means? How do you fillet a fish? And then, so he fired him. He, in the words of the article, he let him go. And apparently Conklin said to Koberger, you've got to do a good job on your cuts, right? And you have to be friendly to people, or at least try to make some eye contact. And not to put too fine a point on it, but what do you think his job actually was? It was cutting fish open. That was his job. And if you think about it a little bit further, if I was the reporter researching this, I would have said, can you show me a filleting knife? Can you show me what your staff used? Can you show me what was done? And then I suppose you could ask probably what would seem like a stupid question: would you use a K-bar knife to do that? And if he said no, then you might say, well, what do people use K-bar knives in effort or in this area? And you might say, yeah, for the dressing of wild animals, or if you're fishing out, in streams, and maybe it's quite a big fish. I don't know what the answer is to that, but if I was researching that, that's the question I would ask. Practically speaking, what sort of knives would be used in your hatchery, and then also what in your to your mind, do you have a K-bar knife, and what are these knives typically used for in this area? That would be my question. But basically, there you have it. So the point is, he spent several months cutting fish open when he was a teenager. And I think also when he was being bullied as a teenager, this was probably when he was still very overweight. So during his humiliation phase, he was cutting fish open. And I think that left an impression on the quiet, fat kid that everyone made fun of. And I remember thinking about this with the what's that, with the Dahmer, the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix thing still very much in the back of my mind, because do you remember Jeffrey Dahmer did something similar with his father, that they would do taxidermy, is that the word? Taxidermy and whatever they were doing. And that was also when he was a teenager. So it made a lifelong impression on Jeffrey Dahmer, that kind of thing. A sort of emasculated little boy, a shy, withdrawn, kind of impotent child that is getting this strange experience penetrating the flesh of animals in that case. And so, yeah, we see that Koberger had exactly the same experience. This shy, picked on kid who, in this one work situation, is given a knife, and your job is to do all of that stuff. Yeah, but the point is, it's still, do I have to say it? It's still spearing a blade into a belly. It's still that. That's the bottom line. So if you think about it, if you want to put yourself into Brian's shoes, maybe he's got all of these voices in his head. He hears the things that they're calling him, the names that they keep saying to him. And meanwhile, while he's working, he's a lonely kid. He's not a particularly happy kid. He holds down the flapping tails, and he does his work. And then while he's doing it, he looks at the silent gaping of the fish. While he's doing this, he sees the fish sort of gaping, and it doesn't make a noise, but it's obviously not. It's to be really stupid about it. It's not a pleasant experience. And then the question is, was it a pleasant experience for Brian? Did it give him some satisfaction? And I'm not a very good fisherman. About a year ago, I caught a very big fish at Mazeppa Bay, and I really wanted to throw it back. And although I'd hired someone to help me, I used his gear. He just wouldn't hear of it, that we'd throw the fish back after all the effort to catch it. And I really wanted to throw it back. But the point is, if you're in that situation, you see a fish being filleted, you see how that tail moves. It's kind of horrible. Fishermen do it all the time. It's not something I really like to do, but that is part of it's like part of the course. Yeah, it's a death of a living thing. And so you kind of get the idea that that, in a way, imprinted on the young Brian Koberger those impressions, those, you know, if you think about fishing, I don't know if you've ever fished. There's scales, there are entrails, there is obviously blood. There's that greasy feeling on your fingers, that sort of oil, and it's messy, that whole thing. And that is something that he would have the smell in his nose. He would have to go home and shower. He would have all of that stuff on him that he would have to wash off. But all of that would be very much imprinted on him. Because he was at a particularly impressionable age when it happened. It's almost like, because he was so insular, because he was so isolated, because he didn't really have any friends, because he didn't have a girlfriend, there's this giant white canvas on which to paint these vivid portraits. And isn't that exactly what happened? Because everything else was so blank. And so that experience must have really stood out to him. And didn't it come back? Didn't some of those sensations come back? You can imagine if you're doing that, maybe in the day, you're doing that job in the day, then you go home and take heroin. What are some of the trips that you're going to go on? What are some of the mind-bending journeys that your brain decides, this is this is the material I've got to work with. How do you think the heroine plays with those sensations? Yeah, I'm not saying that he loved it, maybe he didn't like it. I'm saying that I think it reached into a part of him, and it stayed there in some way. Thanks a lot, Victoria. Thank you. Should I end here? That's kind of as far as I've really taken it. Do you guys want me to talk about the tummy tuck? Yeah, I must say I totally agree with that. So, you know what is, you're going to laugh when I say this, but what is also a horrible way to die is a plant that is in a pot plant. It can't water itself, and then the person just forgets about it. It's a little bit like drowning, except you just, the water gets less and less, and eventually nothing. I know a plant can't talk, but can you imagine how horrible that must be? You plant it in the ground, you can't go anywhere. Maybe you're indoors or you're under something, and someone just doesn't water you, and then that's your lot in life. Horrible. Okay, thanks a lot, Laurel. Okay, so the songbird says, who had a tummy tuck? Brian did. Can you believe it? That's extreme. That's a huge amount of weight gain, and also a huge amount of weight loss. It just shows an extreme fluctuation. It shows someone who's, in a way, very, very determined, someone who maybe feel sorry for themselves or whatever, and they end up eating a lot. I'm an emotional eater myself, and ends up becoming really overweight, perhaps from comfort eating, and then goes the other extreme and becomes extremely disciplined and extremely hard on himself, that he loses all of this weight kind of in a drastic way. And I mean, just look at how gaunt he looks over here. He kind of looks like a skeleton, right? He kind of looks like some of those pictures you see of people coming out of Auschwitz or that kind of thing. He's really, really thin there. Look how big his eyes are and how narrow his face is. Very, very thin at this point. So that's what I'm talking about, are the extremes. And you kind of get the idea that the humiliation must have also been extreme in order to try so hard to lose so much weight. And I don't think it's just pain and humiliation. I think it's also, I want to have, it's like the trials and tribulations of any teenager. I want to have a girlfriend. I want to have sex. I want to have my fairy tale, and so I'm going to try quite hard to get a girlfriend. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to study. I'm going to prove myself to be quite smart. I'm going to make something of myself. And then after all of that, sorry, I find you very rough around the edges. You're very odd. Sorry, no, it's nothing personal. And so he's trying to reach out. He's trying to overcome his own awkwardness. He's trying to overcome his own garbage. But it seems like nothing he does is ever good enough. And unfortunately, then his reaction is to get angry. Instead of saying, how else can I change? What else do I need to do? And observe people around me. One thing I noticed with my own dog, Timmy's an amazing spirit, but he's sometimes too confident for his own good. And not every dog out there is a kind-hearted dog, and he started learning that there are some dogs out there that are pretty mean, and you learn that by paying a little bit of attention. And also when a dog kind of viciously attacks you, you kind of go, okay, I'm gonna be a bit tentative now. I'm gonna pay attention to what's going on. And I must say, when I walked my dog today, normally when I open the gate, he's like, how does that saying go? A bat out of hell. He just bolts onto the field. Today he was like almost at my ankles, almost on the other side, or the opposite side where the field was. And then I realized why. There's a Alsatian that sort of bullies him, that's been quite aggressive towards him. And he, even from a long distance away, he now realizes I've got to be careful. So that carefree, the sort of innocence is lost, in paradise is lost already with him, where he would run on the field and be carefree. Now he's realized, I can't afford to be that naive. If I could talk to Timmy, the first day it happened, I would have said, Timmy, you cannot afford to be so naive. And now he's not. Koberger couldn't afford to be that naive. And instead of that, he became aggressive. That was his response. Well, do I want to carry on much longer? It's already past midnight. Let's have a look at what the poll says. Okay, so 3% say he was quiet. 5% say he was overweight. 13% say he was picked on. I guess it wasn't such a hard poll after all. 80% say all of the above plus drugs and loneliness. So can you see that on their own, all of these things are not going to do anything, but cumulatively, it can build on itself and it can break you. And you've got to apply the same thing to yourself. If you're under stress, if you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling humiliated, if you're feeling burdened in some way, try and see how it's accumulating and try and just take one thing out of that equation. Sleep more, drink less, exercise more. Try and break that cycle where someone says something and you feel something in response, where you say, I don't have to give my power away. I can just, I have my own sense of self. Or I'm going to surround myself with these kinds of people. Or I'm going to just regain my sense of self by taking control of I'm going to be alone for a while, and that's going to allow me to, fill up myself in a way that it needs to be filled up, kind of thing. All I'm trying to say is, if you look at the criminal psychology and you say that is how it happens, block by block, brick by brick, cumulatively over time. If you say, I think Koberger may have committed this crime, right? If you say that, and you say, could something he did 11 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, something he did in 2011, could events from a decade ago be playing into 2022? And I guess one way of answering that is, can you still remember your high school experience? Can you still remember the prom? Can you still remember the first time you broke up with someone, or the first time you had sex, or the first time whatever? And the answer tends to be yes. It doesn't really matter whether you've had a good life or a bad life. You tend to remember your formative years. So do you think working in that fish hatchery when he was 15, 16 years old, and lonely and fat and taking drugs, do you think that had an impact? Do you think that stayed with him? It does stick with you. Also hated high school. Yeah. Okay. So I'll let me carry on a little bit. I'll carry on for another 30 minutes. So Koberg had a tummy tuck. According to the article, let's bring that up. Can you believe it? Koberger had a tummy tuck. So we find out that not only did his body undergo a incredible transformation, Koberger's body changed, his appearance changed, but he also played mind games on one of his best friends. So there's one occasion where Arntz was upset about the death of his aunt. And I think this is quite an incredible story as well. It's kind of his best friend's aunt has died, and Koberger basically kind of makes fun of him and tries to pull his strings. And Arntz says, I'm not in the mood for this stuff. But Koberger wouldn't quit. And Arntz described this, it's amazing he can remember it so many years later. Arntz called this psychological mistreatment. And he said that it became more and more common. And you kind of get the idea that Koberger kind of thought, if you bully me, I can bully you. I can just turn the scales. I can intelligent my way out of this situation. Yes, I may be a bit socially awkward, but I can just use sheer force of mind to think my way out of it. Almost like, who's that character in Big Bang Theory? What's that character's name in Big Bang Theory? I haven't watched it in a while. It's not Cooper. I think it starts with a C. Sheldon, yeah. So Sheldon knows that he's socially, awkward and a misfit, but he tries to logic his way out of it. And do you think it's really working out for Koberger to do that? So he always wanted to be dominant physically and intellectually, said Arntz. Now, why do you think that is? Where do you think that came from? Where do you think that came from? And if you take that statement and you say, so that's what he was like in high school, can you take that into the college situation as well? Do you think he wanted to be dominant physically in Pullman, Washington? Do you think when he was giving the girls low grades, there was an attempt there to kind of bully, dominate physically and also intellectually? Do you think the whole strict grading was a kind of intellectual dominance? So Orange was a year behind Coburg at school. He said he had to show that he was smarter and bigger than you and try to put me down and make me feel insecure about myself. So much of that was a torment that I didn't want to be around him anymore. We know about this. We know about all of this. But where all of this comes from is because Koberger is insecure. Koberger has been dominated. Koberger feels dominated and powerless, especially in terms of the opposite sex. Koberger, I think, feels in terms of like if he goes on a date, like that Tinder date he was on, and the girl pretends to be vomiting. In a way, she's outsmarted him. She's decided, I don't like you and I'm going to get rid of you. He must realize afterwards, oh, I think she's actually trying to get rid of me, or maybe something else. And maybe he sends the big hips or birthing hips comment to try and score a point in an intellectual sense. But can you see the reason why he needs to dominate is because he's been humiliated, because he's been emasculated. The reason why he needs to bully is because he's been bullied so badly, he feels like he's got to bully back to get a sense of himself. In a way, the currency of status seems to be you're either the bullied or the bully. It doesn't seem to see another way around that, like being charming, although some people did say that he was quite charming. The folks at the medical center, I think. Okay. What many people do remember of Koberger from his high school years, this is again from the article, was his considerable weight loss. Right? All of this is gratuitous again, gratuitous drug use, gratuitous humiliation, and gratuitous weight loss. Right? Excessive weight loss. The dramatic change occurred between his junior and senior years. Koberger started kickboxing every day. So this just shows someone who's trying to change who they are, trying to change themselves. Kickboxing every day after school, running in the evenings with a neighbor, and hyper-focused on what he ate, according to the article. In other words, he kind of becomes disciplined. It's almost like he goes from the laziness and indulgence of drug addiction to the focus and discipline of trying to lose weight. That's it. You kind of get the idea that he's trying to turn himself inside out to win approval. It's almost like he's trying everything to try and impress a girl and make a friend. And he's trying too hard in a way. He's trying very hard. And so, did you know this? Did you know this? He tried so hard to lose weight that he developed an eating disorder that required hospitalization. talk about extreme. It's kind of like, is it bulimia? It's not bulimia. What kind of eating disorder would this be? Anorexia. I mean, look how thin he is here. He looks like someone who has an eating disorder. He's extremely thin. Look how you can basically just see a skull there. Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe it is just disordered eating. But I mean, you're basically dealing with not like a guy who just lost weight. He loses so much weight, he looks like a skeleton. He loses so much weight that he's got to be hospitalized. He loses so much weight that he needs a tummy tuck. It's extreme. And then you say, are we dealing with so if you go away from this to Moscow, Idaho, and you stand in front of 112 King Road, right? Right, you stand in front of 112 King Road and you say, are we dealing with an extreme kind of individual? The crime is extreme. Does that mean that the individual who perpetrated this crime is an extremist or an extremist? What do you think the answer is to that? We've got a crime in this house, in this neighborhood, in this city that is incredibly ghastly, incredibly shocking, incredibly extreme. Is the person who perpetrated it an extreme individual? And then the question is, in his backstory, are the extreme moments? In his high school, are the extreme scenarios? In his work environment, excuse me, in his sort of in the university setting, are there extreme things going on as well? What's the answer? And I think you can only have somebody feel that level of rage, that level of murderous intent, if their experience of themselves and the experience of the world is extreme. They've been cut. Coburg has been cut, stabbed, knifed, wounded to such an extent. And I'm certainly not saying if you feel that way that you have the right to do anything. I'm simply saying that my impression is that he felt, that pang of pain when someone rejects you or whatever, that pang of pain when you are told no, or you're told something that's not what you expected to hear. It can feel a bit like a knife wound. It can feel like a lot of stab wounds. Sorry, I'm not interested, And didn't that add up? What does it feel like to be standing in front of a class of 150 people and hear what an idiot you are? The old bad Teachergate thing. So can you believe it? He developed an eating disorder that required hospitalization. So you're dealing with an extreme individual who kind of overreacts, but also someone who seems to be both extremely sensitive and extremely insensitive. He says insensitive things, but if you say an insensitive thing, he treats it very sensitively. Quite a hard person to deal with. The impression I get is he's got some strong opinions about things which may be offensive to people. But if you don't respect his strong opinions about certain things, like don't cook meat on a pot used to make a vegetable pizza, then it offends him. It's kind of a weird, like, double standard in a way. Yeah. But people that are sensitive only about themselves tend to be lonely people who are used to used to themselves, used to thinking about themselves. He does go over the top with everything. Okay, so going back to the article, Arndt's estimated that Koberger, listen to this, he weighed more than 300 pounds, and the amount he lost was as much as half his body mass. So he must have lost 150 pounds. Let's just see how much that is in kilograms. Pounds to kg. 68 kilograms. That's a shitload of weight. That's a shitload of weight. So he must have weighed 140 kilos. That is pretty. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to gain and a lot to lose, for sure. So, according to the article, I've said this to you before. It's not just that he lost a lot of weight; he lost it so rapidly that he had to have tummy tuck surgery because he was left with so much excess skin. Koberger's high school yearbook photos from his sophomore through senior years, reviewed by the Statesman, showed his physical transformation, and that's this. There you get that sense of physical transformation. Would you, if you didn't know these were the same person, would you guess that these two kids are the same person? If this is all black and white, would you guess that this kid is the same one as that one? I must say, what you're saying there, Samantha, it makes me think about Nicola Bully. Is this whole thing of struggling to deal with something and then drinking alcohol. He was struggling to deal with something and then he used another substance. It just shows you that can break you down so much further. You know, adding an addiction to dysfunction and feeling whatever it is, insufficiency, depressed, whatever, it just makes all of that so much worse. It makes that hole so much it's like there's that saying, when you're in a hole, stop digging. The addiction makes that hole even deeper. So during the same period, Arndt said Koberger's personality also shifted and he became more aggressive. I've got a feeling he didn't just lose that weight eating properly. I've got a feeling that excessive drug use, not only heroin, but also weight loss drugs or whatever, I think may have had that impact on him as well. Again, look at Alex Murdaugh. Look how overweight he was. And he changes, not only his face changes, but his whole body changes. And somebody who's not on drugs, try and achieve that level of transformation rapidly. It's really not easy. Really not easy. Okay. So this is quite interesting. Arndt said, it almost seemed to me he had a desire to be the alpha. For no reason, he tried to grapple me and put me in a headlock when I didn't want to. He tried to portray it as big boys being boys, but that's not the way I ever took it. Again, why do you think he needs to be the alpha? It can, yeah. I guess, yeah, it did come into play. Why do you think he needs to be the alpha? isn't it because he knows it's sort of very front and center. He knows that he's not the alpha. That's why he's trying to be the alpha. He's also trying to be the alpha male in the sense of the alpha male gets the beta female, or the alpha male gets the alpha female, whatever. But he wants to be the alpha because he's not the alpha. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, he was Amiga. So he says years later, that just shows how traumatized his friend was by him. Arndt enlisted in the US Army. He was deployed overseas, according to the Statesman. And then Koberger, so many years later, Koberger kind of sends him a Facebook message saying, congratulations, well done that you made it into the army, right? And apologized for how he treated him when they were younger. And I don't know, there's something quite there's something quite admirable about that. I'm sorry I did this, you know, but not just admirable. So there's a side to it that is good, I guess. It's the right thing. But there's another side to it that's pathetic in a way. This arsehole, this bully that tries to make up for it with a few words. And you kind of get the idea that at this point, Coburg is washed up and he doesn't really have any friends and he's treated everyone like crap. And now he's going back all the way back to like a high school friend that sometimes gave him the time of day. Well, maybe the high school friends forgotten about all of that. Well, he hadn't. And so Orange just didn't reply to him. And so you can see how he's losing those few friendships that he had, he loses them one by one. And so he merges into the Pullman, Washington setup, basically friendless, and he can't make any friends. So it's almost like he didn't have a great high school. He was bullied and picked on, but at least he did have a couple of friends here and there. By the time he gets to Pullman, he doesn't have any friends, and his dad even knows that. And then he just can't make friends. He talks to the neighbor. The neighbor's like, I'm going to try and avoid him because he's just not going to stop talking. So Arndt didn't respond to that, just like the neighbor didn't respond. According to, yeah, so I think I'm going to stop here. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Another part of the narrative is the drugs narrative, and I'm just gonna show you a Facebook message that I think is worth looking at, and that'll be the last thing we look at. This is also from the IDAHO Statesman, May 21st, 2013. I would like to hand you a big congratulations for lying to me about driving you around. I should have added it up beforehand, but thought I was doing something nice for someone. This is someone berating him for basically using her, I think, so he could get a ride, so he could buy drugs. And so she says, so thank you. If you would have gotten caught, I would have gotten in trouble just for driving around, not even knowing why. Needles for your aunt? Wow. Real great story. Bye. So you've got another friend who's kicking him to the curb because he's using her. I think his car broke down and then he came up with a story and then used her to get a ride somewhere. So he probably went through so many friends during the drug period, and they didn't really forget it. And so this is one of the messages. And then he says, I'm in rehab. May 21st, the very next day, I'm in rehab. I don't think that's true, but Anyway, so if she says, I know that, then I guess maybe it is true. And then look how much time goes by, about 3 weeks. Sorry again. So there's a little bit of background into the whole narrative. Bear in mind, he graduated in 2013, right? He graduated from Pleasant High School. And I don't think he was actually at school in his senior year. He actually graduated online. And I guess isn't the reason because he was in rehab, because this was happening. And then he also fell out of college because he went to rehab as well. Anyway, we'll maybe talk about that in a separate thing. Okay, so by the way, this live is the very first live I've done that's powered by solar energy. And so this is basically the end of the analysis. So if you want to leave and deal with, we're just going to do a bit of chatter for 5 minutes. But this is the very first live that's powered by solar energy. You might say, how is that possible? How could it be powered by solar energy if it's night where you are? Well, the system I've got, the solar energy in the day gets stored up in a battery, and then the battery slow releases it at night. So everything that's on now, all the lights, all the the computer, whatnot, all of that is solar powered. And maybe I can show you an app on my phone. Can you guys see this? Can you guys see that? So if you look at the thing over here, it's showing 20 watts. So just 20 watts is being taken out of the grid, right? And there's the battery over there. So over there is the sun. Obviously, there's no sun at night, so nothing's coming from there. There's the battery. And at the moment, it's 95% charged, so still quite a lot coming out of that. And right now, my home is drawing 408 watts of electricity. Only 20 of that's coming from the actual grid, which is virtually nothing. The other thing that's so amazing about this app is it tells you what your energy conservation is. Can you guys see down there? Right? Can you guys see that? Probably not. Anyway, it says, and I've only used it for 1 day. It says I've already saved 9 kilograms in terms of CO2 reduction. That's in 1 day. 0.2 kilograms of sulfur dioxide reduction, 3 kilograms of standard coal, and then it also says equivalent tree planting. So far, it's still 0.0. I think it takes quite a lot to. Then it also says I've investment return rate 22.5 Rand. That's about a little bit more than $1. So I basically saved $1 in terms of energy costs. Well, the return in terms of my investment. So yeah, I made $1 back so far of 10,000. So we'll see how far that goes. So I do want to take you guys through the whole setup of the installation. I'll do that on the Team Peachtree channel, getting the solar panels off the truck, up onto the roof, connecting the wires, and just how all of that works. I mean, something I didn't realize is the optimum temperature for solar is 25 degrees, that's Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Let's see if I can quickly check. At 77. So the optimum solar temperature is 77. So like it's not optimum in a desert to have solar because it actually gets too hot. those solar cells get too hot, it doesn't convert that well. And then the optimum angle for solar panels is 30 degrees, and the optimum time is 12 o'clock in the day. And so anything beyond that's not optimum. So it's funny, after I'd had the solar installed and I took my dog for a walk, I ended up looking at leaves and looking at, leaves aren't in a horizontal position almost ever, like perfectly horizontal. And leaves almost never are in a vertical position other than maybe grass, short grass. And so if you look at trees, the leaves of trees are often at an angle. It's quite interesting. So the next time you go outside, look at tree leaves and look at that they're like little solar panels, and they're trying to get that 30-degree optimum angle. So little interesting things like that I would like to share with you in the Team Peachtree on the Team Peachtree channel. What did someone say? Very cool eye panels, but no battery. Okay. Timmy saved me a lot of help, and he was also saying, please change your footwear. Thanks a lot. It's not so much that it must pay for itself. It's also just trying to have the lights on. Like I can do a live now, and I don't know if the power would be off now, but maybe I get a super chat, and otherwise I wouldn't be able to do a live, because so that's another way you could make up for it. What was really cool was when the power was off, like it was actually load shedding, and I actually said, look, I think I'm gonna go and run an errand, and the guy said, oh, do you want me to turn the power on? And so in the middle of this load shedding event, they literally turned the electricity on, and it's been on ever since. And the solar panels were only activated, I think, for about an hour or two. So it really is quite amazing. Okay, let's look at a couple of last comments. Lisa McGuire, thank you also for your other $5 on some other video. Thanks very much. Terry says, my most liked comment ever was the flip-flop comment. Yeah. I don't know, I find sneakers on a ladder is, in a way, you don't really know where your feet are. That's just my thought. Thanks a lot, Margaret. I actually want to do a separate live, maybe, where I talk about the solar. I was thinking maybe I should do a fundraiser specifically for the solar. Thinking about it, I don't know if I will. We'll see. Anyway, I didn't slip. It wasn't that bad. CB says, I just wondered what you saw as addict behavior. I'm curious because I have an addict in our family life. I think addict behavior is moodiness, someone who's very inconsistent, someone who never has any money, someone who seems to be very dishonest and unreliable. Thanks, Liesel. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So just to clarify, the number, I was kind of thinking about this just before I went live. The number 12 clue we all missed is in a way a repetition of a previous clue, which was that he hunted or was a butcher, that he basically must have used a knife previously. And the fact is now, it has been confirmed that he worked in this hatchery, that he was butchering fish for a full summer in 2011. So that is something that's really significant. That we know that he must have used a knife, and he was using a knife in a particular way. And did that have some kind of imprinting on his psychology? That's really the question. So that is something that I didn't know, and I think is really fascinating. And when you get to know Effort, and you know that he worked at that pizzeria, we know that he worked at the hatchery as well. But even if you didn't know that, you would have assumed that he may have, because the hatchery is right next door. And then you also got to wonder, did he not fish there sometimes? Did he not also catch fish? And you know, and all the rest. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Miami Lifestyle. Thank you. I must say, I'm very frustrated with YouTube because I'm trying to cover the Nicola Bully case, but and please don't use the S word here, because they might just age restrict me for saying the S word. So please don't even write it down. But yeah, like, I'm trying to authentically and honestly and genuinely talk about certain aspects in that case, and then you get, like, yeah, it's definitely frustrating. So I might just leave the Nicola Bully case for a while. I'd actually prefer to address that stuff when the autopsy comes out and all that. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating, but I think YouTube also wants to be careful. So I guess that's what's going on. Yvonne says, do you know why this live has commercial interruptions? Sorry, is it irritating? I clicked the thing to say ads, but I don't need to do it again. Is it very irritating? Kelsey, is it Kelsey? Says, I'm back, can't stay away. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Is there anything you guys want me to cover that I obviously haven't covered because things have been really disrupted? There's so much that I've been wanting to deal with. John Benet Ramsey. I don't really want to deal with the old Madeleine McCann thing. I think it's ridiculous, but I guess I will be dealing with it. Buster. Things that Buster's been saying. His dad takes frequent showers. They leave their guns lying around everywhere. Do you guys believe that? So I think I do want to cover the whole thing that is being coached. And isn't it bizarre, a situation like that? Your mother and brother have been murdered, and your father's accused of doing it, and then you on the stand to defend your father, who might be the murderer. What a situation to be put in, right? See what you guys say. MT says it's fine with ads. Thank you. Yeah, and when Buster testifies, and you just see how Alex smiles like this proud father, there's something very weird about it. What did you guys think about the judge telling the one lawyer, stop tweeting about this case? It kind of makes you think, as social media, what a stern position judges and lawyers take within the court process of social media, right? Quite interesting. To me, one of the biggest home runs, if that's the word, that the defense have produced is they sort of did the ballistics, and they said the trajectory of the bullet, there's a bullet that I think went through the window, was too low for even if Alex Murdoch was on his knees, it would be lower than that. I thought that was quite a compelling argument because he's something like 6'3". He's a particularly tall dude. But I must say, I always imagined for Paul's skull to sort of, go off like that, he had to have been shot at by someone like crouching down at a very low angle. Without even knowing about the ballistics, that's what I thought. But yeah, I mean, you wonder what the jury are thinking in terms of that. Do you think Alex is going to testify? No, I don't. I hope he does, but I don't think he will. Yeah. I don't know if he was lying down, but I think he may have been kind of crouching. Thanks, Mel. Okay, last couple of comments. Do you think Buster is gay? So I must say, when he testified, I didn't get a gay vibe from him. I mean, his hair is a bit interesting, but the way he spoke, I didn't really get a gay vibe. I don't know what you guys thought. Thanks a lot, Antoinette. Thank you. So Zero says, I look forward to your podcast. So I'm probably going to do episode 36 of Vincent van Gogh. That'll be on the Team Peachtree channel around about this time tomorrow. A little bit earlier than this, but a little bit around about this time tomorrow. So if you've never watched an episode, maybe you want to watch that one. We're going into quite an interesting period where he goes into Paris and starts going to brothels and picking up syphilis and learning about color. And he also becomes socialized. He's a very awkward artist as well. Now he starts socializing, meeting other artists, and he starts to become basically himself. The Vincent van Gogh up until now paints brown potatoes and sort of really boring scenes. After this point, he really discovers color. So it's actually quite interesting. Deanna says, thanks for your insight. Always enjoy these lives. Thanks a lot. Okay, I think that's about it. I'm going to try and put some additional photos of the weaver bird. I took a few more photos as well. I'll try and put those up in the live as well. It's amazing how bright that yellow is of that bird in the sun. When the sun's shining, it really is very vivid yellow. It's like a neon yellow. So anyway, look out for that. Amazing how my voice has stood up to 2 hours of yakking. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it does feel like a bit of bravery. Yeah. I must find that subject matter takes quite a lot out of me. It's not just like, let's talk about this or talk about that. I'm kind of going to some dark places in my own life, and yeah, definitely does take a bit out of you. Okay, thanks a lot, Laurel. Yeah, I know Buster's got a girlfriend. I do know that. Jazzy says, he struck me as that character that Edward Norton played. Oh, you mean the one in, what's that movie called? The one with Richard Gere. Someone's going to Primal fear. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay. Living with the Pines. Thanks. Yeah, I need to go and sleep. Yeah, they are getting brutal. Yo, I must say, I'm a little bit surprised at the British true crime community. Like, I don't know, I somehow thought they'd be more measured and polite. And like, if anything, that the circus is more, I don't know, you know what I mean? The circus on that case is, I don't know. I really am surprised. Really, really am surprised. Thanks a lot, Margaret. Okay. It's quite funny. Yeah, so what's quite interesting with, and I'm going to take you guys through 7-step, just 7 aspects to it. But what is quite interesting, when you install solar panels, it becomes kind of a competition. I put 7 on my roof, but then someone else will like put 8 or whatever. It is a bit of a competition. It's a weird thing where when you don't have them, whatever, but when you do have them, then it's like, oh, how many panels do you have, kind of thing. It's not so much how much you need, it's how much, you know, that whole thing. It's a bit of a pissing contest, but it's actually quite funny. Yeah, no, definitely. A lot of people are saying that there was no dog, but the fact that it's on Wikipedia, and you might say Wikipedia doesn't mean it, but Wikipedia derives its content from news sources, and you have it in a news source that they were walking their dog. So I just find it weird, unless it is a typo. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Yeah, you definitely do. You definitely do. My dog helps keep me balanced. That's for sure. Yeah. Carol says, I invited the less popular kids over to my house and sit with us at lunch. I did makeovers on the girls and just generally try to show an example of kindness, which I learned in the home. Yeah. Do you need special outlets? Well, you need a special fuse box, but other than that, no. But I'll show you guys. I took a little bit of video. It'll just I just need to put it all together. Thanks, Amy. There's stuff I want to like communicate, but you just sort of feel like if you say certain things, then YouTube's gonna, you know, I don't know. Yeah, so with Rust, they've succeeded in taking away the enhancement. So literally, Alec Baldwin can't be jailed. And what's quite interesting with that is I think his lawyer, I think there's this perception, there's this idea that I don't know, I kind of get the idea that they felt that they need to get rid of that enhancement, otherwise he would face 5 years in jail. And I think that's quite interesting. Yeah. So unfortunately, or the way things turned out, that enhancement came out in 2022, and so it's not going to apply. As far as I know, the prosecutor is still going to prosecute the one that they try to get rid of. Same as, is it Ann Taylor? Ann Taylor is still in place with Brian Koberger at $200 an hour. Yeah, no, for sure. Mega Truth says New York Post article about Paul being violent with his girlfriend and dad. Okay. Yeah, I also thought it was quite interesting, Buster talking about his father's drug habits. How do you do that in a way that's how do you do that in a way that's like no big deal kind of thing? Yeah, the Letitia Stork case is supposed to be starting up end of March, 2 weeks of jury selection, and then yeah, so that should be quite interesting. Yeah, that's quite a good idea, but I think I'll do a refresher in March on Letitia Stork. So this time in March, Letitia Stork. Remind me, Terry. Thanks a lot, Maria. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's incredible the way Timmy actually tried to climb up this ladder. He actually got all paws onto the ladder. I mean, he only got one rung off the ground, but that's a dog that really wants to follow you wherever you go, right? Oh, really? I'll check it out. Thanks a lot. I'll check that out. Okay. Well, on that note, guys, bear in mind you can watch Murders on Netflix. So maybe that's something to look at what comes out of that. Oh, last thing to say, did you know that Alex Murdaugh's first name is Richard? So it literally is like Richie Rich. His first name literally is Richard. It's Richard Alexander Murdaugh. So it is like Richie. It's quite funny. Yeah, I'm quite surprised that that didn't catch on. I don't know. Is it bad taste? Stephanie, welcome back. I hope you had a good day at work. Stephanie, remember I told you about something? What turned out the explanation was it was a typo. Can you believe it? I was like, what's this all about? Oh, sorry, it's a typo. I don't know whether I believe that, but at least it's catastrophe averted. Yeah, Richie Rich. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Do you agree with me that this was really worth communicating? The whole tummy tuck, the whole working in the fish hatchery, whatever, and just getting a bit of a deeper sense of Coburger. Did you agree that it was worth doing? I think it was. So I hope you did as well. Take care. I hope to see a lot of you at the episode 36 of the Van Gogh letters. And I'll try and get the solar installation thing up ASAP as well. The video, the solar is up. Thanks everyone for being here. Mods, everybody, really been good. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Sleep well. Thanks a lot for the super chats. And don't forget to go and subscribe at Team Peachtree. Let me, as a final thing, just put the channel in chat. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by this time next month, and I'm halfway there. So please help with that. At the moment, 511. So if everyone on here subscribes, that might get us up to 700. You never know. Victoria, good night. Everyone else, Alina, thanks a lot. Cool. Okay. Take care, guys.